Hello, hi and welcome once again to the Week Today here on Wednesday at 10:30 in the evening. Once again we shall be discussing issues that are local, national and international. We'll be looking at things that are going around in Europe and some of the controversy that a lot of Muslims are feeling here in Britain and abroad. I've got 5 or 6 items on the agenda today. We may not get through all of them, but we'll see what we can do with some of them. मैं आज कुछ 6 आइटम्स पेश करूँगा, तो मैं दरख्वास्त करता हूँ जो हमारे जो नाज़रीन हैं, जो व्यूअर्स हैं, कि आप भी कुछ सवाल करना चाहें तो आप उर्दू में भी सवाल कर सकते हैं, तो हम इंशाल्लाह ट्रांसलेट करके अपने गेस्ट से भी उनकी ओपिनियन लेंगे। तो प्लीज़ आप पूरी कोशिश करिएगा कि इस प्रोग्राम में आप इंटरेक्ट करें हमारे के साथ। I was just saying the same thing in Urdu because I want to try to be able to build bridges between both the English language and the Urdu language as well. So some of the issues that we're looking at, we've got Sheikh Aziz, the Prime Minister of Pakistan here in Britain, meeting Tony Blair, talking about interfaith, whilst at the same time Bush was in India and Pakistan. Interestingly, the meeting with the Indian Prime Minister has resulted in India being given almost permission to produce nuclear civil facilities. A lot of people felt here there could be double standards, that whilst Iran has been asking for the same facility, they're not getting it. The question is why? Whilst here in Europe, Irvin, a historian, has been imprisoned for about 3 years because he thought that the Holocaust never happened, and this was a crime in Austria and several other countries. The comparison that the Muslims are making around the world is that a person thinks of something which is against the law, and yet around Europe and around the world there's been havoc because of the cartoons that were produced of the Prophet Rasulullah, and many Muslims feel that there's a great amount of double standards taking place here. What needs to be done here? What kind of laws could be produced, if any? But at the same time there are those who say freedom of speech should not be restrained, rather it should be taken in a way that a person should be able to put across their views, their feelings, either in writing or in some form of diagram. But I shall leave that to you. Then of course, if we look at what's happening in Dutch, with the Dutch and the Netherlands, is this a spin-off of the activities that's taken place around the world regarding Muslims and Islam and their beliefs? That the Dutch Parliament have indicated they are considering in banning the burqa. Now there's only 50 women in Netherlands who wear the burqa, and yet they want to ban it. So which way is Europe heading? And is the gap becoming bigger and greater between Islam and Muslim? काफ़ी मुसलमान दुनिया में इस वक्त ये सवाल कर रहे हैं कि दुनिया में जब इस्लाम का इशू आता है, इधर कोई ऐसी अदालत नहीं है कि मुसलमान को प्रोटेक्ट कर सकते हैं, लेकिन जब किसी और मज़हब या कम्युनिटी के ख़िलाफ़ कोई बात होती है या कोई सोच होती है, जैसे अरविंद ने किया था ऑस्ट्रिया में, उसको उन्होंने 3 साल की सज़ा दे दी है। तो आज मैं ये इश्यूज़ अपने पैनल के साथ भी डिस्कस करना चाहता हूँ। तो इसके अलावा एक और भी इशू है जो टीवी पे था लास्ट वीक, कि शरिया इन द यूके, दैट देयर वाज अ डिस्कशन, could there be Sharia in the UK in certain areas where there's large Muslim communities? I'll turn now to my guests, and first of all let me introduce Nasir Hafizi. Thank you, Nasir, for coming to my show today.
It's a pleasure.
Thank you. And on the right hand side I'd like to introduce Sadiq Hamid. Sadiq has been on the show before. Sadiq, it's great to have you back on the program. If I can turn to one of those issues, and I think the issues of double standards. Nasir, I know you're a solicitor and you've been quite actively involved in a number of issues regarding potential policies on the terrorist bill and racism, etc., and the double standards that are being created here. I mean, what I'm trying to get across to the views is, how do you think the Muslim community feel when they hear that you've got double standards, not only at an international level where you have the decision of nuclear facilities for civilian use, down to the grassroots where people in Austria can go to jail because they think of something which another group of people feel they shouldn't?
I don't speak on behalf of the Muslim community, but from my conversations with imams, representatives of the Muslim community, representatives of Muslim groups, and people who I speak with on a day-to-day basis, you know, my friends, my relatives, there is a distinct feeling that I get that the Muslim community is under siege, and there is a fear within the leadership within the Muslim community that they can't express any opinions or views about anything. So when I approached them about making a campaign against the terrorism bill that's going through Parliament at the moment, many of the imams said, listen, if we start speaking about the terrorism bill and saying, look, we don't want this clause of glorification of terrorism or dissemination of information of terrorist publication, etc., that means the government and even the general public, may feel that they are terrorists, that they're involved in some sort of violent protest.
Simply because they're protesting against the terrorist bill. So by default, what you're saying is that the imams and the Maulvis and the mosque committee feel that they would be depicted by default as being a part of it.
Exactly. And yet, there are many groups and organisations, people of good conscience, justice, who have campaigned against various aspects of the terrorism bill, and yet they haven't got the same implication that they are on the side of the terrorists. But this is from what many of the imams who I've approached, about 5 or 6 who I've approached. And what's ironic is that Muslims have a problem, which is that, and even I feel this as well, that my views and my opinions, somebody who's been born, brought up, educated in the UK, is now not valued. So if I express a concern or a criticism or even support for some particular aspect of policy or legislation, then my views and opinions aren't as valued because of the colour of my skin, because of the beliefs that I carry about Islam and being a Muslim. And it's quite ironic, when I spoke to a journalist and I was getting some advice off him about, you know, trying to promote a press conference in Manchester, here in the UK, against the terrorism bill. And he said to me, listen, Nasir, what you need a bishop next to you, standing shoulder to shoulder against this, because you're going to then be heard, and your comments and your views and your opinions are going to be considered more valued and more important. Well, and I felt particularly grieved about that.
Well, that's almost derogative, isn't it? If I can just take a call, I have a caller. Could you please come on, please? I'm sorry, I didn't get your name.
Hi.
I have a caller.
Hello,
yes.
अस्सलाम वालेकुम।
वालेकुम सलाम जी।
अच्छा भाईजान, मेरा नाम साजिद खान है।
साजिद साहब।
जी। मैंने आपसे ये बताना था कि ये जो शरी काउंसिल लंदन में है, शरिया काउंसिल लंदन में, तो उनका क्या काम, उनका यही काम है ना कि ये जो प्रॉब्लम्स है तलाक वगैरह और खुला वगैरह, उनका मसला सॉर्ट आउट करना है। हमने 3-4 दफा उनको फोन किया, तो लोग जो आगे शरी काउंसिल वाले जो मौलवी साहब हैं, वो पहले तो वो हमारी बात सुनते ही नहीं। जब वो सुनते हैं तो वो कहते हैं जी आपका काम हो जाएगा लेकिन 500 पाउंड लगेंगे। फिर हमने एक और नंबर पे डायल किया, उन्होंने कहा 350 लगेंगे। और फिर हमने एक और नंबर पे डायल किया, उन्होंने कहा कि 100 पाउंड लगेगा। ये मैं आपसे पूछना चाहता हूँ, ये क्या चक्कर है पैसों का, और ये क्या ये इस तरह का मामला हो रहा है?
ये पहले मैं सवाल ना अपने पैनल को एक्सप्लेन कर देता हूँ इंग्लिश में। What the caller is saying is that he's contacted the Sharia Council in London a number of times, and he wants to ask him a number of questions. I think he made reference to marriage, for instance. But what he's saying is that first of all, they're not responding appropriately, and then they're asking for money, and he said they've asked for the amounts up to £500. Just let me go back to the caller. जो शरिया काउंसिल लंदन में आप बात कर रहे हैं ना,
हाँ जी,
तो असली काफ़ी लोगों को मैंने उस तरफ उनको गाइडेंस भी दी उनसे बात करने के लिए। ये आप पहली दफ़ा मैंने सुना है कि वो रिस्पॉन्स सही तरीके से नहीं दे रहे, और उनके पैसों का मेरे को नहीं मालूम, पता नहीं वो फीस रखते हैं या नहीं, लेकिन जो लास्ट 5-10 ईयर्स में जो उधर शरिया काउंसिल के जो ग्रुप लीडर्स थे, उनसे कुछ लोगों से जिनसे मैंने रब्ता किया है, काफ़ी पॉजिटिव अच्छा रिस्पांस आया था, लेकिन मैं उनके बिहाफ बात नहीं कर सकता। मैं अपने पैनल से पूछता हूँ, हो सकता है कि उनको कोई इसकी इल्म हो। I mean, do you have any knowledge regarding the Sharia Council in London?
Well, I think with respect to the call, I mean, I don't think these are the topics we're supposed to be talking about.
He's asked the question, but if you can respond to it.
As far as the inquiry, I think he really does need to direct it to people there. There are, if he's not getting through to that particular number, there are associated organisations that will have information, like the MCB. They could best advise him. I know there's the people who are involved, but if he's not getting any joy, he should try to ring one of the other organisations.
It is a hot topic though, where Sharia and Muslims trying to resolve issues, disputes, whether they're family issues or whether they're commercial issues via the Sharia.
Is that the Sharia Council in London?
Just generally Muslims, there's a tendency now that they would like to resolve issues utilising Islam, Islamic law, Islamic Sharia. I know that there's a Sharia Council in London. I know that there's a mosque. There are certain mosques and certain imams who take a lead in trying to resolve issues from a Sharia basis. The difficulty, however, using the Sharia in the UK would be whether any remedy that is obtained via the Sharia Council or via a mosque imam, whether that would be enforceable within the UK law, whether it has the same status and standing as going through the UK courts. I don't think it has at the moment, and I think that's the debate.
Even though we've digressed from the subject quite a bit, I know now that if you marry like in Pakistan, and the certificate that you get for marriage certificate you get there, it is accepted here by the law now, and you would be considered as married.
Sure, that's immigration rules would permit any marriage that takes place in a foreign country which is considered legitimate and valid in a foreign country is considered legitimate and valid here. The issue then would be, what about those marriages and divorces that occur here in the UK according to Islam, whether they are valid according to the UK courts? And again, there's different views, and generally
they have to go back. From my understanding, is if they have to have a divorce, for instance, they would have to not only have a divorce within the state, but they'd also then have to have a Sharia divorce as well.
Sure, that's
now
right.
What comes before the other is always difficult, but that is the procedure in that. But I think we've digressed considerably from our subject. I don't know if the caller is still on the line. Is the caller still on the line? No, he's not on the line. Sajid Khan Sahab, I mean, you've heard, आपने सुन लिया हमारी जो डिस्कशन है इधर, कि बेसिकली जो दूसरे ऑर्गेनाइजेशन एफिलिएटेड ऑर्गेनाइजेशंस हैं, जैसे एमसीबी का भी नाम दिया गया था, आप उनसे भी कांटेक्ट कर सकते हैं, तो उनसे भी आप ये अपनी जो ग्रीवेंस है जिससे आप खुश नहीं हैं, उनसे बात कर सकते हैं कि जी हम ये कोशिश कर रहे हैं कांटेक्ट करने का, तो इंशाल्लाह हो सकता है वो भी आपकी मदद कर लें। हम भी कोशिश करेंगे शरीया काउंसिल से बात करने की, उनसे आपका सवाल उन पे हम पेश करेंगे जी। Thank you for your call, बहुत बहुत शुक्रिया। If we can go back to the actual topic.
And whatever you do to that caller, whatever you do, when it's through the Sharia Council or wherever, is get it in writing. So at least you've got it in.
Right. Well, spoken like a true solicitor.
You got it in record.
Yeah. We were talking about the terrorist bill, and you said that you have a bishop standing next to you. I mean, I find that quite derogative. That means to say that we have no stature, no position, no credibility as human beings in this country because we look visually different, or we have a different faith. So how do we move forward? I mean, we're talking about double standards internationally, and yet at such a local level, at such a simple level, there seems to be a gross misrepresentation of us and our characters.
That's absolutely true, and within the Muslim community there's a tendency now to push forward the right face, and the right face would not be a brown coloured skin or a black coloured skin, it would be a white coloured skin, a revert, a convert to Islam, and that's
a white coloured skin. I don't get that. What do you mean?
Well, it would be an English looking individual who would be able to present themselves and the Islamic perspective, the Islamic, the Muslim concern to the general public. But in terms of you're talking about the double standards, is that here you've got a situation where the Muslim community are self-censoring themselves. They are regulating themselves to such an extent that they're not saying anything. They're not expressing any opinion and view at all. And yet, on the same token, you have this idea of the cartoons. You mentioned the cartoons, and the talk and the discussion is about, listen, you're living in the UK, you're living in Europe, you should accept the Western liberal values of freedom of expression.
Well, is it really liberal? Let me just stop you there, Nasir. I have another caller. It's a Mr. M. Khan from Bradford. Mr. Khan.
Assalamu
alaikum ji. हाँ जी बिल्कुल, आप उर्दू में बात करें तो मैं पूरी कोशिश करूंगा उसकी ट्रांसलेशन करने के लिए, कि मेरी खुद उर्दू इतनी अच्छी नहीं है, तो आप माफ कर देना प्लीज।
नहीं, आप जो बोलते हैं वो तकरीबन सुनने वाले अच्छी तरह समझते हैं।
शुक्रिया, थैंक यू।
मैंने आपको नौजवानों को देखकर मेरे दिल में एक बात पैदा हुई कि जो हमारी स्पेशल जो न्यू जनरेशन है,
हाँ जी,
ये अंग्रेजी तो आई रियलाइज दे गुड स्पीक इंग्लिश, but the misunderstanding about my understanding, the very little understanding about Islam.
Yes.
If you get there and publish Sharif, they're not title to Islam, they need to basic foundation which is provided Muhammad Arabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam from Medina Sharif or from Makkah Sharif. They need to same a rule of regulation. You try to convince, especially new generation. I know when my student, I try to my own language. मैं एक नौजवान के घर गया तो उस नौजवान ने मुझे कहा कि मैं अपनी बीवी को तलाक देना चाहता हूँ।
अच्छा।
तो मैंने पूछा why? कहने लगा कि I don't like it. मैं क्या what is reason? कहने लगा कि reason is that because my wife don't like my parents. मैंने तुमसे पूछा how many years ago did you married? They said only 1 week ago married.
Oh, अच्छा खाली।
I'm being surprised 1 week going married and you going to provide to talaq. And please try to new generation, especially youngest people,
हाँ जी,
to give it to understanding. Don't go too quick to Sharia. Sharia is not very easy to open, sing and get the water. I can put in the water. You understand Sharia?
हाँ जी।
No, please try to understand rule of regulation. If you are going money shop, the money shop say okay. If you don't like to your girl, you can choose. You can accept it or you can divorce. You are free of child, free of choice. But because please give judgment, you have to answer it. Islam is created Allah Bari Ta'ala, not Maulvi Sahab, not any other leader. And you be careful, especially youngest girl and boy. We know it. They're not fully.
खान साहब बहुत बहुत शुक्रिया, थैंक यू वेरी मच। एक और कॉल आ रहा है थ्रू। अभी मैं पहले अपने पैनल से बात करना चाहता कि बहुत बहुत शुक्रिया आपने फ़ोन कॉल की है, एंड इंशाल्लाह एक और कॉल आ रहा है जी थ्रू, तो प्लीज़ आप इस कॉल को थ्रू कर दें। तो नाम मेरे पास इस वक्त नहीं है। अस्सलाम वालेकुम जी, कौन बोल रहे हैं जी?
मेरा नाम सलीम है and I'm calling from Manchester.
सलीम साहब, how are you?
Alhamdulillah, yourself?
Thank you, fine, thank you very much. Thank you for calling.
Right. Okay. Yeah. A couple of issues really on today's topic. First of all, if you could just briefly remind me what the topic is.
Well, we've actually not been able to get straight through the topics because, alhamdulillah, we've had a few calls. We had 5 or 6 items on here, and we only have a 30-minute program.
Right.
Some of the items we got on, it was Bush visiting Pakistan and India, the nuclear issue in relation to civil developments in India, also the burqa issue regarding the Netherlands and the Dutch Parliament who want to pass a ban on it. We wanted to also touch on civil liberties really, and I'd say the freedom of belief and expression of Muslims in comparison to what's happening around the world, where as you know yourself that in Austria a person was sent to jail because he thought something which was against the law and they put him in jail, yet there's been images depicted of Prophet ﷺ in an extreme way. Yeah.
make a point of correction there. He didn't think it, he wrote it.
Yeah,
he was a historian, and that's where the argument came from.
I just leave what he was saying is that he was a historian, he wrote this. But I mean, I remember reading in the news, I think he indicated that he changed his mind on it or something and said that
at the last trial where he was convicted.
Exactly. So he'd shifted from what he originally said and tried to water it down a bit. But Salim Sahab, do you want to make a question? Do you want to put a question to me or the panel? Okay. I have another caller on the line. Could you please give me your name, please? Thank you.
Yeah, sorry, it's Salim. I got cut off.
Okay, Salim. Do you want to ask a question to the panel?
Yeah, basically my question is about, the civil liberties and the double standards that, they've been talking about.
Yes.
And this burqa issue and things like that. Basically what I want to say is that, the Dutch Parliament, and I know various European parliaments have been saying that, and France including, want to ban the symbols of religious faith and stuff like that.
That's right.
And, things like that. If that is the case, then they should actually, if it's going to be one rule, if they're going to say, for example, Muslims can't wear burqa, they can't wear niqab, then they should also at the same time say, right, fine, the other faiths that are the majority faith in that country can't do the same as well, because if they're going to do that, then it's an infringement of the other person's human right. And if they say, no, well, okay, it's only applicable to one community, then they're actually infringing their own legislation.
And the UN article on human rights, I believe.
Yeah, precisely. They're infringing their own human rights article, and it's a baseless argument then.
I'll put that question to the panel, really. I mean, I'm coming with Sadek on that point. I mean, Salim's made a very valid point there.
Yes, and I would agree. I think there's a whole load of issues there, and I think for us Muslims, the communities, we've responded in different ways. A lot of us, unfortunately, have become very emotional, and rightly so. I mean, our Prophet has been insulted in the most derogatory manner, but at the same time I think we need to remember the lessons from the Rushdie affair.
So you're looking at restraint, or a different way of protesting.
Yes, there's ways of responding, and the intention of the cartoons were to incite Muslims to perpetuate the stereotypes which are actually being portrayed.
The point
and the thing is, that's what happened. That's what's happened.
How have you come to that conclusion that it was there to create anxiety and conflict?
It's obvious. If you've seen the cartoons, I don't know if you have.
No, I haven't. I didn't want to be honest.
But there were very obvious themes around associations of Islam and violence, and the Prophet of Islam somehow introducing violence. His turban, the cartoon figure had a turban that was shaped like a bomb, etc. So we know the clear intention was to ridicule the Prophet, the most sacred figure in Islam, at the same time to make the association between violence and Muslims and their faith. So obviously when Muslims overreact and start jumping up and down and screaming and shouting and start attacking buildings and property, I mean, what is that saying? I've talked to a lot of English people and non-Muslim friends and colleagues, and they say, well, actually, Muslims, you didn't do yourselves any favours there, because this is what the cartoons are actually saying, and a lot of Muslims, unfortunately, did protest like that. But at the same time, there were Muslims that didn't. But if we look at the media coverage, it was the ones who were jumping up and down who got all the exposure, wasn't it? So it's about how we respond and intelligently and in a long-term strategic manner.
Well, Sadek, if you remember when this happened, that there wasn't any organised, level-headed, cool-minded organisations coming forward to make a peaceful protest. I don't recall that happening. Rather, the only people that were making the protest were the ones that you just described.
Well, again, point of correction, I think the first Friday after it really blew up, there were two organisations protesting. It was Hizb ut-Tahrir and there was the Al-Muhajirin group. Hizb ut-Tahrir protested very peacefully and in a civilised, dignified manner. They made their point. But very close to them were the lunatics from Al-Muhajirun who had the placards calling for people to be beheaded and murdered and so on and so forth. And that's what really focused the world's media attention, was this handful of extremists.
That would happen.
Yeah,
would happen.
And the HT message wasn't really covered at all.
Okay, I mean, you mentioned that.
But the following week we had
all the mosques were
a large demonstration.
But that came very late.
It did, but
Does that not show that the Muslim organisations, I mean, they've got, what, 12,000
I think that needs to be directed to the people who organised the second and the third organisations.
They did not respond.
It was, I agree, it was too late.
Quick enough.
The damage
and if there's a vacuum, then those people who were frustrated behaved in a way in proportion to their frustration. And maybe in retrospect they might think, well, we shouldn't have done it that way. But if a large organised, amicable, democratic process took place of a demonstration, maybe the same group might have joined them in a peaceful way. I mean, maybe
I agree. I mean, the problem that the Muslims have got generally, you know, it doesn't matter if it's in the UK or anyways, the lack of leadership, proper unified leadership, and where you have a lack of unified leadership, you have delayed responses, and you have a vacuum filled by others. Let me just go back to something here. One is, from a rights point of view, everybody has a right to express opinions. You know, I believe that. I honestly believe that.
Would you say the National Front, the fascists would also have the right to...
Absolutely. Because there's
would that mean also you believe that the artist had a right to make the characters?
There's a second right. Just to explain, the second right that I'd like to explain is that but people don't have a right to insult, people don't have a right to offend, people don't have a right to be abusive. And anybody who falls into that category should have the sanction of public dissent, or in extreme circumstances the use of laws to punish them going through the courts. But the basic point is everybody has a right to express opinions and beliefs. And what was interesting about the saga, the cartoon saga, is that when it came to Muslims protesting...
Sorry, I've got to take a call. I've got one more call. Can I take the call? हेलो
जी, अस्सलाम वालेकुम।
हाँ जी, अस्सलाम वालेकुम।
मैं मैनचेस्टर से उम्मे आदिल बात कर रही हूँ।
हाँ जी, उम्मे आदिल जी।
सबसे पहले तो करंट अफेयर के हवाले से आप एक कामयाब प्रोग्राम कर रहे हैं, तो मैं आपको इसकी बहुत बहुत मुबारक देती हूँ।
थैंक यू।
दूसरी बात ये है कि आपके प्रोग्राम में किसी ने पूछा था शरई काउंसिल के बारे में ना।
हाँ जी, बिल्कुल।
कि 500 पाउंड कभी मांगते हैं, कभी 300 पाउंड मांगते हैं।
हाँ जी।
तो मैं ये अर्ज करना चाहती हूँ कि शरई काउंसिल के साथ मुझे वास्ता पड़ा है 3-4 मरतबा काम करवाने का, तो ऐसी कोई बात नहीं है।
अच्छा।
वो एक बड़ी नॉमिनल सी फीस लेते हैं, 40-50 पाउंड के करीब, बाकायदा बात सुनते हैं और ख़ास तौर पर शरीयत के हवाले से केस को डील करते हैं और खुला का फिर सर्टिफिकेट वगैरह देते हैं।
अच्छा, सॉरी, मेरे को आपको रोकना पड़ेगा इधर कि हमारा टाइम ख़त्म हो गया है, तो मैं आपका शुक्रिया अदा करना चाहता हूँ अपने गेस्ट्स का, नसीर साहब का, सदीक साहब का, हमारे जो नासरीन जो व्यूअर्स हैं, एवरीबॉडी वाचिंग दिस प्रोग्राम, थैंक यू फॉर योर कॉल्स, थैंक यू फॉर वाचिंग, एंड आई लुक फॉरवर्ड टू स्पीकिंग टू यू नेक्स्ट वीक फॉर अनदर 30 minutes here on the week today. Thank you very much. Good night and assalamu alaikum.
DM Digital.
I love
I love KO. क्या आप अपनी सेहत के बारे में फिक्रमंद हैं? घबराने की कोई जरूरत नहीं। दवाखाना दारुश्शफा ब्रेडफोर्ड बर्तानिया में कायम हुए 40 साल हो चुके हैं। दुनिया के लाखों मरीज हमारे कामयाब इलाज से पुरमुसर्रत जिंदगी बसर कर रहे हैं। अगर आपको कोई भी तकलीफ है, मसलन कब्ज, गैस, बवासीर, नींद की कमी, खारिश, घबराहट, दमा, माइग्रेन, हैकनी, जोड़ों का दर्द, हे फीवर, पट्ठों या मर्दाना कमजोरी महसूस होती है, तो आज ही ब्रेडफोर्ड या लंदन में मुलाकात के लिए फोन करें। दारुश्शफा, तजदीद की रिवायत, मयार की जमानत। दारुश्शफा।
Digital.
थॉर्नबरी इंटीरियर्स कारपेट एंड फर्नीचर शोरूम, ब्रेडफोर्ड का मशहूर वही शोरूम थॉर्नबरी में ऑर्थोपेडिक बेड्स और आपके खूबसूरत और हसीन बेडरूम के लिए खूबसूरत बेड्स और फर्नीचर, लेदर स्वीट्स और इनके अलावा फ्री मेजरिंग एंड फ्री फिटिंग सर्विसेज। अरे फ्री डिलीवरी, फ्री कार पार्किंग, ये सब आपको कहाँ से मिलेगा? थॉर्नबरी इंटीरियर्स कारपेट एंड फर्नीचर शोरूम में। तो याद रखें, लीड्स रोड, ब्रेडफोर्ड। ऑफिशियल स्पॉन्सर्स ऑफ टीवी सीरियल गीता, ग्रंथ, कुरान और बाइबल।
समझना इंसान बात है सीधी सादी भाइयों, बात है सीधी सादी भाइयों, समझे ना इंसान। बात है सीधी सादी भाइयों, समझे ना इंसान। गीता, ग्रंथ, कुरान और बाइबल सब है एक समान, सब है एक समान। बात है सीधी सादी भाइयों, समझे ना इंसान। गीता, ग्रंथ, कुरान और बाइबल सब है एक समान, सब है एक समान। सोचे बिन समझे बोले देखो क्या अनजान। मेरा धर्म है सबसे ऊंचा, मेरा धर्म महान। बिन सोचे बिन समझे बोले देखो क्या अनजान। मेरा धर्म है सबसे ऊंचा, मेरा झगड़ों में आके फंस गया ये इंसान। गीता, ग्रंथ, कुरान और बाइबल सब है एक समान, 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 सब है एक समान।
आपकी 50,000 की पेमेंट हो गई है जी। आप कल आ जाना ऑफिस में जी। ठीक, 2 बजे हम पेपर साइन कर लेंगे। ऑलराइट, थैंक यू, बाय।
किटी, नमस्ते।
हाय,
कैसी हैं आप?
I'm doing alright, आप कैसे हैं?
बस ईश्वर की कृपा से सब ठीक है। किटी, बाय द वे, वो जो हमारे गीता, कुरान, ग्रंथ और बाइबल की कमेटी के मेंबर्स हैं, उन सबको आपने लेटर्स भेज दिए अगली मीटिंग के लिए?
सबको लेटर्स भेज दिए बॉस।
देखो किटी, मुझे आपकी एक बात अच्छी नहीं लगती।
क्या?
ये बार बार आप मुझे बॉस कहती हैं, ये मुझे अच्छा नहीं लगता।
तो फिर मैं आपको क्या कहकर पुकारूं बॉस?
आप जानना चाहती हूँ कि मैं क्या चाहता हूँ? किस ना है?
Absolutely.
मैं चाहता हूँ कि ये बॉस का रिश्ता खत्म हो जाए और एक इंसानियत का रिश्ता शुरू हो। जानती हूँ क्यों? क्योंकि ये अमीर और गरीब की दीवार में हमेशा के लिए खत्म कर देना चाहता हूँ और एक प्यार का रिश्ता कायम कर